Got it. Okay, guys. Yesterday, we went over creating a new React project using a package. Again, keep telling this again and again and again, because this is how you create a new React package. You would never create a package writing your first line of code from the scratch. You would always use a boilerplate, start using npm create React app package. I created a React application. Okay, then by default my application loads a file called app.js, and inside the app.js I had a bunch of lines of code which I removed for now, and then I started adding more lines of code. The first thing I did was to import the React from React. I've used ES5 syntax initially, using var react is equal to require React. Then I switched it to ES6 syntax. The ES6 syntax uses a fancy keyword called import, which makes sense because you're exporting something. Then you have to, if I'm using an export, you have to import. Now that two words go hand in hand. And then the way you create a new class component, I keep telling you a class component for a reason. They'll go down the line, you'll understand why I keep telling this is a class component. I created a class with the name of my component, which always starts with a capital case. You should not use a smaller case. That extends my base component, react.base component. Then by default, every React component is supposed to have a default function or a component lifecycle, which we discussed yesterday, how a butterfly takes stages, like it lays eggs, then becomes a caterpillar, then pupa, then the butterfly, right? So like a component, like a butterfly component lifecycle, React also have a component lifecycle, or only 3 phases in the component lifecycle. Initialization, where your React first loads on the browser. That's the initialization. Anytime your component is updated, that's called updating phase, second phase. The third phase is destruction phase. We also took an example of a kid performing on the stage. Preparing for the performance is initialization. During the performance, it's updating. Once the performance is done, the kid gets off the stage, it's unmounting. Okay, 3 phases. It's the same way every component undergoes 3 phases in React. Every component undergoes 3 phases in React. And this is a very important interview question. 10 out of 10 interviewers would ask this question. Got it? And then we switched our gears and started learning more about how we can do conditional rendering. And if the user is online, is user online? If you remember from yesterday's class, then I used is user online false. Then I used this in here, and I said if user is online, which is true, and then I would return if the user is online, and if not, I would return the user is offline. I'm not adding more details in here for the brevity, and you should be able to see if the user is online. You should see on the browser this element. Now this is not an element, it's a bunch of elements. Okay, and this becomes a component. A bunch of HTML elements becomes a component. You can have more than one element. This is an element, right? I can have bunch of those elements. Each of this is a HTML element, but combined together, this becomes a component. Okay, and this is what I was trying to tell you from yesterday's class. A component is nothing but is a bunch of HTML tags or a bunch of HTML elements. Each of this is an elements. You can call them elements or a tags. Okay, and then we went over if conditions, else condition, how we can totally skip the else condition and directly render. And also we took a very good example of how return terminates the execution of a function. Right, whenever you encounter a return inside a function, the function will early exit. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word early exit. The function terminates there and then, and we will take that advantage and see. And inside the render function, anytime a return is encountered, you don't really need to put an else case in here. And this is very important. This is called conditional rendering, because depending on a condition, you're rendering your UI. Okay, you're rendering a component or a HTML template. Okay, I'm using a template. Template is also a bunch of elements. There's an airline gap between what a component and a HTML template is. When I say component can have dynamic values. For example, this is a component because I have a dynamic values inside it. this dot state dot color always changes. It's not the constant. But if I hard code this becomes an HTML template. Okay. Now, anytime your data is injected into an HTML template, that becomes a component. It's a little confusing, but you'll get used to it. This is a little component in here, and the entire thing is a React component. Okay, all the way from class to all the way to the bottom is a React component, and the component can omit, can spit, can throw out a bunch of HTML tags or a bunch of HTML. This is the core part of the component, because React component is all about creating the HTML elements. If you're not creating an HTML element, there is no reason for you to have React. Vivek asked a very good question. What happens if you do not return anything? If you're not returning anything, there is no reason for React to exist. You need to return at least one div element on the return function of render. Then we went over how each of the component life cycles go over. We went over constructor, which is the first component life cycle, and then we went over component will mount, which is the second component life cycle, and the last component life cycle inside the initialization phase, we went over the component did mount. And no matter how you arrange these component life cycles, they are always called in the React order. The first order is a constructor, then the render, then the component will mount, then the render, and the component did mount. And then we also talked about a magical object. I did something like this. I created a variable right outside is user online, and then I changed it here, is user online to off false. Then I also changed it in here in the component will mount, and then I also changed it inside the component did mount. I remember doing with that with a color, but you get the idea. So it was working until the render function, and the render was able to show the color, and then I changed it to some other color here, and then it stopped working because the render function already been triggered and the UI is already shown on the UI, and the component did mount has no effect on the UI. In order to have the component did mount have the effect on the UI, we need a magical object called state. Now, state and render are very good friends. You know, they are like best friends. Whenever state, state guy is very sensitive guy. You tell him something, he's easily offended. Whenever you try to change anything to that sensitive guy, he tells the render, hey, listen, that guy was telling me, some bad things about you, and the render would start triggering. Think about this, like render and the state are very, very good friends. Anytime the state changes, a state object changes, like in my case, that state object is just, this is my whole state object. I can literally put any number of keys and values in here, a JavaScript object. Then anytime any values inside my state changes, it will auto trigger the render function, no matter what. Okay, so I use this as to my advantage. And what I do is I go back and the component did mount. I change the state, and I cannot literally write this dot state dot color like this. This dot state dot color is equal to green. I cannot do this because this might make you lose your job. Okay, so instead you go do like this in this dot set state. We do this for a reason, and we'll talk more about it when we're talking about the virtual DOM, which is the core concept of React. Now, you don't do this, you do this, and whenever the set state happens, now the sensitive set state go back to render and says, you know what, there is a change on my object. Do you mind going and making another render? So if I go back and see my console window, you should able to see. How do I start my application, folks?
npm start.
Awesome. And how do I know if I have to use an npm start or something else?
Package.json.
Perfect. Thank you, Hannah, for joining in. So we went back and checked the console message in here. And every time, did I miss the console message anywhere? Yeah, there you go. So I have to put the console message here. And instead, this is a constructor. Okay, and I also put the console message on my render function. And then filter only my messages. And this is what it happens. Look at how the constructor is called first, which sets the value to red by default. Then the component will mount is called, which sets the value to blue, which I commented this guy out here. And but still the component will mount still renders the red in color. We'll talk more about it. Why is it doing that while we talk about the concept of virtual DOM and asynchronous functions. Now then the render is called, which is good, right? First constructor, component will mount, render, component did mount, everything is orchestrated in a way. And then something very weird happens. The render is called again. First time the render is called with blue, second time the render is called with green, because I did a set state inside my component did mount. Cool, guys? Any questions until this far? Folks, any questions until this far?
Bro, one question. It is related to the question I asked before. Now we have this, and what if we have the customized function here? What will be here?
Yeah, so let's do that. I'm trying to put that to another class where you can really understand what does it do. But since you're curious, I'll put in another custom method in here, which really doesn't do anything. But then I would do this dot set state and then color to, coral is another color, or I can do tan. And you should see the method is never called, because the React would only call the component lifecycles. It would never call any method which is not part of the component lifecycle. We need to explicitly call this method. Okay.
Okay,
And
bro.
yeah, and we will talk about this while dealing with click handlers. User clicking something and something changing. Okay. Now this is good. Just give me a minute. Okay, so guys, let me clear off the poll. If everything looks good until this far, we will jump on to another important topic. How many of you are familiar with what a API is? Abdul, Arjun, Hana, Karthik, how many of you are familiar with what an API is? Have you ever heard this word called API?
It's a service when we request something and it returns something.
Exactly, Arjun. Okay, so very, very, very quick thing. Okay, API stands for Application Programming Interface. Okay, and what is the benefit of this, guys? If you have your Facebook or Twitter or all these applications on your phone, do you really think all your photos, videos are stored right on your device? Or do you think they are stored on a remote server? Manoj, what do you think? Are they stored on your device? If you upload a photo onto a Facebook, does it store on your device or does it store on a remote server?
It stores on a remote server.
Because you have to log into another device and then you should be able to still see the photo irrespective of the device on which you uploaded the photo. So it has to upload it to a remote server, right? And now and now you need a way where you can push the data or upload the data in in a plain computer terms. I would say like a Google Drive. I would just drag and drop the things onto my Google Drive and the Google Drive stores my cloud. Now this is user interface. I mean, like I can click, drag on the folder, but behind the scenes, you have a URL. Okay, a URL. This just a URL, a uniform resource locator. A URL is nothing but it's a gateway to a remote server. Okay, so you have the server will open up a port or an interface where you can go onto that URL, post the data on that URL, okay, and then later point of time use the same URL to retrieve the data, or a different URL to retrieve the data. So this is what you do. You're on a Facebook, you put in your username, password. The username, password will be appended or push it to a remote server using an API. Behind the scenes, the backend will try to figure out is Manoj's username and password are valid. Okay, and if that is valid, then it will send a reply, a response to your phone saying, okay, it looks like username password is valid. Now I will give access to that server, or I will give access to that account. Cool. Now I'm using an API to store the data and also retrieve the data. A very simple example I can show you right now is my JSON. I will store a very small piece of data on a server, okay, and then I'll retrieve back the data. And now, see, if a client and a server are talking to each other, they have to both agree on a protocol. Like, for example, I'm talking to you guys in English. We both agree upon English as a communicative language, right? So that's how I talk and you understand, and you talk back and I understand. So we agree upon a protocol called English. That's the same way the client and the server has to agree upon a protocol, a data exchange format. So this, I have to tell it, okay, this is how the format of the data is. If that is an image, okay, this is how the image data looks like. If that is a video, okay, this is how the video stream look like. If that is a username, okay, this is a string format. So I have to tell the server and the client, guys, you both agree upon a protocol, okay, data exchange format. Now there are mainly two data exchange formats. Okay, you might have heard this word called JSON, which is JavaScript Notion or JavaScript Object Notion, or SOAP. These are two major formats the data is being exchanged. No, this is only data related. This is only like strings that can be passed. There are other formats like video formats and other protocols. We will not go into that details. But the major thing right now, SOAP is a little outdated format or outdated protocol between client and server that still exists these days, but it's kind of outdated. Now JSON is very important, and throughout this class, we will send the data in JSON, we'll get the data in JSON. Okay, if you remember a data, what a JSON looks like, our application, if you go back and remember, I say JSON, a packet.json. Packet.json is a JSON format. What does a JSON format looks like? You open up
An
a curly,
object,
yeah,
group
you
of
open up an object, exactly, a key and a value. Guys, there's a slight difference between what a JavaScript object is. Now the JavaScript object is something like this, right? So person is equal to name, and I say Vikram, and immediately my JSON throws an error. Hey, look, you are putting in a JavaScript object. It is not a JSON object. The only difference, you know what a difference between a JavaScript and a JSON is that the key has double quotes around it. As simple as that. If the key doesn't have a double quote, then that's a JavaScript object. Okay, so I go back, copy this guy here, and I'm doing an object in here, and then I paste my JSON here. I'm telling it JSON, but does it really is a JSON or an object? Karthik, is it a JSON or an object? It's a JavaScript object or a JSON? How do you do that? How do you tell the difference?
Double quotes around keys.
Yes. So I'm trying to post this data onto a server. No, this is a very simple, it's a fake data server which doesn't save the data for a long time, but this is for demonstration purposes only. Then I hit a save button, and this is a little slow, guys. Bear with me. and it always fails the moment I use a video sharing option. I don't know why. It has something to do with the video sharing option. Okay, I'm gonna disconnect and connect in a minute. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, can you able to see my screen as well?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Now I would paste that back in here and hit a save button. And as soon as I hit a save button, it yells at me saying, hey, Vikram, your JSON appears to be invalid for a reason, because I'm not using a double quotes in here, right? And then click a save button. It saves my data, but it gives me a API. Look at this, API.myJSON. It's giving me a path to my data. I just copy this guy, go to any browser URL, any browser window, and then I paste this. And what should I get back? I should get back my data. As simple as that. API is nothing but it's a gateway to a server, a database, or behind the scenes it can be a hard disk, pen drive, or any storing device that you write your data directly to. Instead of putting on your hard disk, you use a API or a URL to put the data onto a database and then retrieve it back again. Any questions on what an API is in a very simple terms? Folks, are you still with me?
Yeah.
Okay, any questions on what API is?
Can you explain in simple words? Is it like communication between server and the UI?
Yes, it's not just the UI. Yeah, for this particular course, we'll be using for the UI, but it's just a URL where you can post the data. I mean, push the data and then get back the data. Even if you close your machine, your data is on a remote server. You're writing that to a remote server and then pulling it back again using the address. And this is the address to your data, which I'm telling it as an API.
Okay.
Okay. So going forward, we will use a Firebase API. So I would like everybody to start registering to this Firebase. You should able to use a simple Google login, create an account if you do not have one, and then go ahead and create a project. I'll quickly show you how do you do this. Go ahead and create a project, put in your project name, and click continue. And this should create a project for you. Okay, and now I'll quickly show you how I write the code. I write the data to Firebase, and then how I retrieve back the data. Okay, your project is ready, sample project, and you should see something called database in here to the left. You see the database here, and then click on the database, and you go and create a database. Start it in the test mode, enable it. Okay, and then you have a very simple key in here, then I go it, create another key. I would say name and some name, and I hit save button in here, and that should save my data here. And then I go back, use the Firebase, this guy, this URL, copy this, put in here. Oops. Oh, on the name, I copy this URL, go in here and say .json because I need the format to be in the JSON. Okay, as soon as I hit that, I get the value of whatever key is there on my database. I want each of you to create a database, play around, try adding the data. You can add any number of keys in here. Also, you can do nested keys. So something like this, I would say person, and then do name. Okay, and then I go back, I click on my person and I go to browser person.json. That should get back my data. This is one of the databases that I'm using for the demonstration. This can also be scaled for production purposes. Firebase is from Google. They have a very intuitive database where you can actually write and read from the database. You can go right directly into the database without an API. They also provide APIs to write to the database, but this really helps throughout the project to see how we change the data, how we make the clicks on the project, on the UI, and then how we can also see how the things have been changing on the Firebase database. Okay, sounds good? Any questions here? Okay, cool. Now let's jump on to, this is gonna be tough for me. How many of you know what Ajax is? Is Ajax a technology, library, framework? When I first started web development, folks, like 5 years back, I could not able to interpret what an Ajax is. Can anybody know what an Ajax? Does anybody know what an Ajax is? Karthik, Vivek, Arjun. Karthik, can you like really in a plain English words, can you tell the class what an Ajax is?
Basically, anytime when you want to load a part of your page, when you don't want to reload the whole page, you do Ajax request to get data particular to that section of the page instead of the whole page being rendered. You only refresh part of the website.
Perfect interview answer, Karthik. Very well said. This is Ajax. Now, let me put that in a very simple terms. You, guys, we were trying, okay, let me pull up this guy, okay? Now, whenever your page loads, right, folks, whenever your page loads, what I'm trying to do in here is localhost 3000. And if I go inspect it and I go to network and I give a little refresh, and you should able to see that it's making a bunch of calls to my localhost server. Okay, you should see this is a localhost server which I am running on my VS Code in here. Okay, and once it hits the server would start serving index.js on this public folder. Now I'm running the server in a development mode, so it will try to provide the source folder, but in production it will always serve with a public folder. Now, previously when Ajax was not invented, when Ajax did not come into the picture, if you have to change anything on the browser, you have to refresh the page. For example, if you're clicking on a link, it has to go to a new page. I mean, anything that you have to do on the browser. For example, how many of you watch cricket? All of you, I believe, right? There's one website called Cricinfo. I don't know how many of you know about this. This Cricinfo. Let's go to that website. Is it Cricinfo, guys? I don't remember.
Yeah, Cricinfo,
Am I spelling it right? Cricinfo?
right? You want to see the commentary? Scroll.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go. There's something. Look at this. There are top events in here, but if there is a live match that is happening without even refreshing the page, you should able to update the live score in here, right? You might have seen this. You don't have to constantly refresh the page to load the latest score. Even your page is loaded, and even then you should your browser is updating the score, right, folks? And that is Ajax. Without reloading the page, you can update the content of the HTML document, and that is Ajax. It's not a technology, it's not a framework, it's not a library, it's a methodology to update your page. And this is not Ajax is a combination of multiple technologies: your browser, your APIs, your DOM, your HTML document. All of this put together will put up what Ajax is. Now let's, and I missed to tell, Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Okay, asynchronous JavaScript XML. Without loading the page, you can able to change the content of the browser window. Okay, you can able to change the UI, and that is Ajax. Now, trick question. Karthik?
Yeah.
Okay. Karthik, if I make a request to the server, can you exactly tell me how much of time does it take to get me back the reply?
No, because it depends on the data you're sending or the data you're receiving. It can be small or big.
Exactly, right? So sometimes you have a faster bandwidth. Sometimes you have a shorter bandwidth. Sometimes the server is busy. For example, if you're watching a World Cup, you're trying to stream, and it doesn't stream well because the server that is streaming out. Oh, this is the best example. How many of you looked at the JNTU results? It always crashes because the load the server can take is really low. And at peak times, you cannot really load the page, right, folks? And IRCT website, of course, that's another example, right? So you cannot really tell, folks, this is the amount of time that I can get back my data. So I cannot really tell, and that is the reason it's called asynchronous. This is a programming term, and let's break down and see what an asynchronous call is. Okay, so I go to JSBin, JavaScript, HTML, console. Okay. Now synchronous is this is synchronous. If you go to Chipotle, you as soon as you enter the counter, the front guy would ask for here or to go, right? And after that, if you ask for here, he picks up a bowl, asks for white rice or a brown rice. Then you go for beans. Then you go for chicken or veggies, and then you put the other things. Can I change this order? Can I go ahead and ask for the beans and then go for to go? Then can I go for brown rice or white rice? Can I change the order? I cannot, right? I can make the line go long. Now this is synchronous because everything should happen one after another one. One thing depends on another thing. Without a bowl, you cannot put in a rice. And even without the guy who is putting the rice does not pass the bowl to the next guy who's putting the beans, he cannot put the beans. So one thing depends on other thing. And this is called synchronous, which is in sync. Okay, now let's see what happens here. Console.log, I say this is first. Okay, and then I console.log, and this is second, and console.log, this is third. Okay, and give it a run and see what happens. Every line of code is executed, and then the JavaScript compiler is jumping to the next line. only after my first line of code is executed, it's going to the second line. Now this is synchronous. What if I have to make this asynchronous? Look at this. I would do set timeout. I'm using a inbuilt browser API, okay, and I'm telling it hold for how long? I'll tell it. I say hold for some time, or hold, do this, which is this guy here, okay, and then I ask it to hold for 2000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds, okay. But instead of logging in this directly, I will pass a function here. So what I tell that set timeout guy is, go execute. The JavaScript compiler will do like this. It will go execute the first line, and the second line, the set timeout, is asynchronous. It will not wait until that line is executed. It will jump on to the third line. Now, if my logic and explanation is good, what do you see the output? Arjun?
132.
132, 1/3, and 2 after
After 2
2000
seconds.
milliseconds. Okay, this is asynchronous. Now, what we try to do in this guy in here, guys, we all API calls are asynchronous. Take my word, all API calls are asynchronous, because you can never know how long does it take. I'm putting in a 2000 time in here, but all API calls, we never know if the API call will get the data or will not get the data, will drop the packets, will the intermediate server broke, intermediate router broke, some internet provider filters the data. Anything can happen from the point you initiate a request to the point you get back the data. We never know how long it's gonna take. And also you can set the time. You can also set the time. That's a more advanced concept. You can set the time. If my callback, if my getting the data is taking more than 15 seconds, just don't wait for the data. Show a screen saying that unable to load the data, and you click it again, and it'll make another request. You should able to see this in times where on maybe on a Facebook video or somewhere where you have a low bandwidth and you're trying to click the data, the video doesn't load, and then you click back again and it loads sometime. Because behind the scenes we never know how long did it take, and we cannot really depend on the data which does not know how long it did take. So what we do is we provide a function to it. Okay, API, go get the data, but I don't know how long will you take to get the data. But whenever you get the data, I will providing you a function, and whenever you have the data, call that function. Okay, real world example. If you go to any haircut salon, like back in India, if you go to any haircut salon, usually on Sundays you take longer wait times. And the funny part is that the guy who does the haircut, no matter how many people are there, he always says 10 minutes. But just wait 10 minutes, I'm done, just wait 10 minutes. Even there are 100 people in the shop, he'll always try to hold you until 10 minutes, I'm done, 10 minutes, I'm done. That 10 minutes will never be done. The whole day, it will take whole day, even then he will tell 10 minutes. Okay. So what we do is, bro, I understand you're keeping up the customer. I know what your 10 minutes is. I take my number. Whenever your 10 minutes is done, give me a call. In your terms, whenever your 10 minutes is done, just give me a call. So what I'm doing is call back. Okay, I'm telling, okay, whenever you're done, give me a call back. And this is called a callback. Okay, folks. I make a request and I don't wait for the request, but instead I provide what it's supposed to do when the request is resolved, which is called a callback function. And then I don't depend on that, and I keep going to the next line. And if you are new to JavaScript, Karthik, is JavaScript a multi-threaded programming language or a single-threaded programming language?
Single-threaded.
Single-threaded programming language. Manoj, if I put that in a real-world example, Manoj, you have a restaurant, Manoj.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a restaurant. You have 100 tables in your restaurant, and you have 100 servers. and each server is dedicated to one table.
Okay.
Okay, how many customers can you serve at any point of time?
Like hundreds.
100, right? 100 customers. You cannot serve more than 100. You can serve less than 100, but you cannot serve more than 100.
Yeah.
But if you serve less than 100, the remaining servers, you're paying them free.
Yeah.
Right? So your resources are getting wasted. But what if you have a server who is like really fast, a Flash, a cartoon character called Flash who can run, go get the orders. You can have infinite number of tables. Can you manage this restaurant with infinite number of tables with one single server who is really fast?
Still not.
I mean, maybe, right? Maybe. I'm not wasting any resources in here.
Yeah.
And okay, having multiple servers is called multi-threaded. Each task will have its own server until the customer comes and he eats, until he goes back. The server will be dedicated to that guy, and this is called multi-threading. And this is the philosophy of Java, object or multi-threaded programming language. Java is a multi-threaded programming language because if your requests are increasing, you have to increase your servers. Okay, but JavaScript is a single threaded programming language. You can increase any number of requests. That guy will go run. Whenever the order is ready, he will serve the table, and until he eats, he goes back and gets another table, cleans up, gets another order, serves. Everything goes like real fast. Okay, so JavaScript is a single threaded programming language, and we never have to make the server wait on a single thing. What he does is he gets the order, goes to the kitchen, gives the order, and can come back. He doesn't wait for the order to complete. Okay, and if he waits for the order, then you're blocking the server. If it doesn't wait for the order, you're not blocking the server. And JavaScript is a single-threaded, non-blocking programming language. You should never block JavaScript. Okay, and one way you can block JavaScript is alert. And see what happens. If I click here, run, until I click the OK button, it will never go to the next line. And this is called blocking. And you guys never see on a website which is really good. People never do this on a websites. If they're doing this, maybe they're like they're really going out of the business soon. You should never block JavaScript. Okay, there are use cases where if I'm typing something and I close the browser, then you block the JavaScript because you don't want my changes to lose. In this case, I just lost my changes. Oh, I have them back. Cool. And until I click the OK button, the alert is never executed. Cool. And this is asynchronous. Asynchronous set timeout is asynchronous, and I'm making it to wait for 2000 milliseconds. And then whenever the 2000 milliseconds is done, I'm calling a function which is called a callback function. And then I'm executing a third line of statement. And see what happens. Third, second, done. Okay. Are we good until this far? What is a API call, saving the data, retrieving the data, asynchronous calls, and Ajax?